Well, there we go. And we are live. Guys, it's Christmas. Merry Christmas to you all. Josh and I, with all of our holiday cheer, I've got on not just this holiday ugly sweater, but I've also got on Christmas Star Wars PJs underneath this as well. So I'm all ready to go. Josh has got his onesie on. We just got news from the Heat here, and it's Shams saying that Jimmy Butler prefers a trade out of Miami before the trade deadline. Big duel going on social media between Shams and also Jimmy Butler's agent. The last time this happened, by the way, Josh, I don't know if you saw this one that happened, I believe it was last year in the playoffs, where Shams reported that Jimmy Butler had an MCL injury. He was going to be out for multiple weeks. Jimmy Butler's agent goes on Twitter and goes, "This guy is full of shit." And I'm paraphrasing here because this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no information. And the next day, he'd announced that Jimmy Butler is going to be out multiple weeks due to a knee injury. So I know that a lot of people were dunking on Shams because the Heat or Jimmy Butler's agent came out and said that Shams was just lying and making stuff up. But he's done this before, and Shams ended up being right. I tend to think he's right this time, too.
Yeah, I assume he's right here, too. I don't know where he ends up, though. Feels like Golden State is really the only option. I don't know where else he would go.
Yeah, so the report from before that Jimmy Butler wanted a trade to Phoenix, I don't doubt that he would like to be in Phoenix. It just doesn't make sense logistically, because why are the Heat taking back Bradley Beal in that trade? Unless there's some sort of 3-team trade where other pieces are moving and there's other assets involved. That's maybe where things get more interesting, where you could come up with more scenarios for where Jimmy Butler lands. By the way, this broke right at the top of the show here that he is asking out of Miami, which also Jimmy Butler, my arch nemesis, this happens everywhere Jimmy Butler goes. He asks out of everywhere after a few seasons. This has been a long running thing where he's there for a while. It's great at first, and then he's falling out with everybody involved. He asks to be out. This is rinse and repeat for Jimmy Butler. But official guess, where are you going to say if you have to pick one team?
Golden State. It's the only one that makes sense to me. Like, even if Phoenix is a 3-team trade, whatever team Bradley Beal has to end up on, he's got to agree to it. And it's not going to be one of the teams that are added to, like, it's not the Pistons. He's not going to say yes to that trade. So, like, or it's not going to be Utah, these teams that could, like, take him on. Bradley Beal's not saying yes unless he's going somewhere he actually wants to be. Now, would he want to be in Miami? Maybe. At least that one is feasible, although I don't know why that trade would happen. But if there's a third team involved, whatever team is taking on Bradley Beal has to be a team that Bradley Beal wants to play for, or he'll just be like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, maybe he would want to go to Miami, and then Jimmy Butler goes to Phoenix. Then there's some other team involved that I don't even know what the involvement of another team is at that point, or for. No. So I don't know. We'll see. Even
Golden State just has the bodies. They have the picks. Like, that can be the deal. I don't know who else it would be.
Yeah. So, and then Golden State trade. I mean, like, I guess it depends how highly Miami potentially views somebody like Kuminga. Kuminga is clearly not valued very highly in Golden State. I don't know if you've seen some of these press conferences Steve Kerr has, but he talks about things the team does wrong and talks about the poor mid-range jump shots that are being taken early in the shot clock. If you watched any Golden State games, he's very clearly referring to Jonathan Kuminga. So he's fallen out of favor in Golden State. I don't know, maybe Podziemski, Kuminga, other assets. Is that enough maybe to make a trade happen?
Probably. Yeah. I mean, it should be at this point. I don't, when I look at the rest of these teams, I don't immediately see a name that makes sense to me. Like, I can't, there's so little that makes sense. Would Houston do it? Because that seems weird.
They tried to a couple of years ago, if you remember.
Yeah. Like, OKC, no. Memphis, no. Dallas, no. I don't think the Nuggets could. Clippers, no. Lakers, clearly no. Although, in theory, I guess they could. He's not going to the Spurs. He's not going to the Timberwolves. He's not going to the Kings. The rest of the West sucks. I don't know. I don't see a single team in the East that would make sense. There's just not a lot of options.
I agree with you. I think Golden State makes the most sense. They have a team that you and I both said coming into the year, like, oh, this team is a little bit underrated, perhaps, by the public. Yeah. But it's become clear, too, that Steph is on the downside. And some days he still looks great. There are other days, too. Like the other day, Steph goes, I think, scoreless for a game. And he just doesn't have it sometimes. It's just going to happen. He's a small guard who's, 36, 37 years old at this point.
Yep.
So I think there's an urgency to try to do something in Golden State.
It seems like they're going to make some move, whether that's Butler, whether that's Zach LaVine, something. I think we're going to have like a relatively active trade deadline this year.
Seems to be the case. Seems to be the case. And we've got the Christmas slate to talk about today as well. So if you guys could do us a favor and you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also want to let you guys know that tomorrow is the final day for our portfolio EV sale that we have going on for the holidays. If you guys sign up with the promo code GIFTEV, get yourself 50% off. So that's less than $50 for our Odd Shopper portfolio EV tools. And these have been invaluable to me. I shouldn't say invaluable because I know how much money I've made. And so I could put an actual dollar amount on what it's been to me. Valuable. But very valuable to me, much more valuable to me than what the $50 per month would be to sign up. So if you guys are looking to sign up for our betting tools, maybe you haven't tried out betting before, or maybe you're somebody who tried betting, you're not profitable at it. This is a way to really simply improve your process. You build a portfolio based on what books it is that you want to be betting on, as well as what it is in terms of sports you want to be betting on. I recommend just trying to bet as much as you can, but you build portfolios out and it is going to tell you what to bet and how much to bet based on the size of your bankroll. I've been doing my bankroll building thread on Twitter, just directly using the tools that we have here in the Odd Shopper portfolio EV tools. And you guys have seen over the course of the year, started with $100, now at nearly $700. Sign up for yourself. Promo code GIFTEV to get $50 off. So let's start talking about the slate, Josh. And one thing I want to ask you at the top is we have a ton of players that are listed as questionable today, way more so than you would normally see for a Christmas Day slate, and also big names. Anthony Davis is officially questionable. Jason Tatum is questionable. He was a late scratch the other day. LeBron James is questionable. Jamal Murray is questionable after missing last game. Derek White is questionable. Drew Holiday is questionable. D'Angelo Russell is questionable. Andre Drummond is questionable after getting ejected, then unejected because they found out it was a flop, and then he gets hurt a couple minutes later after coming back. So we've got all of these guys who are listed as questionable, and I do think these guys could kind of be sorted into different buckets, where some of the role players who are questionable I'll take a little bit more seriously than some of the stars. But how seriously do you take guys like Anthony Davis and LeBron being questionable?
Not all that serious. Just especially with this game being at Golden State, like it would really surprise me if these guys traveled to San Francisco and then didn't play. So like if we somehow got word that one of these guys was still in LA, it might change things up a little bit for me. But I just assume that pretty much everybody is going to play today. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Boston guys sit, but it's not like I have a lean on which one of them that would be. They tend to just like, they're comfortable having a guy out every day and it doesn't really matter. Like they could look at this a little bit differently than I think the other teams can, but I'm kind of just assuming that everybody is in.
Yeah, there's a couple of ones that I take seriously that I also don't know what to do about. So the most annoying injury on the slate is Jamal Murray. He's questionable and he sat last game. So I feel like this is if somebody's actually injured, where like the Lakers stuff, it's all nonsense. AD and LeBron have been on the injury report just about every game for 3 years or something like that. So it's just a boy who cried wolf scenario. I can't take it seriously because more often than not, it doesn't mean anything. But Jamal Murray sat last game, which makes me think he's live to sit again today. And if he does sit, it is extremely annoying because Russell Westbrook would then look really good as a guy to plug in. But this, because of the way the slate is staggered for the Christmas Day slates, you get a game every 2.5 hours. I think that's what the time frame is, 2.5 hours between each game. This is the last game on the slate. If Jamal Murray is ruled out, we are not going to be able to make any kind of real viable pivots. So how do we even approach something like this? Or are you just confident that he will end up going?
I mean, the good part of it is, like, if Murray is out, then you just put Russell Westbrook in his spot. You eat the salary. It's not like the most fun situation in the world, but at least you can do that. You can also, depending on where you have Murray, as long as you have him in a guard spot, you're going to be fine. Potentially the utility spot in this scenario. Bradley Beal is $200 cheaper in that same game. He's another guy that you could just directly swap Murray to. So that could be a lot worse. Like if Beal were slightly more expensive than him, or if Westbrook wasn't on the team. It's not going to be the most fun situation in the world if that's the only game left and you have to swap off Murray. But there are two options for you that really aren't going to be that big of a letdown. Like Westbrook, if Murray is out, is going to project pretty well and pretty similar to Murray if he's in. So that one, while it sucks and, it would be nice to corner some additional value there, I think you can get off of him easy enough.
So Jamal Murray, that's one I take seriously. I also think the injuries to D'Angelo Russell, I think that's one that potentially could be somebody who actually sits. So as far as LeBron and AD, that one doesn't matter to me. D'Lo, though, I mean, the Lakers don't even give a shit about D'Lo. I think JJ Redick is close to not playing him at all at some point this season. And then Andre Drummond as well. But even if Drummond was to be out, it's not like Yabusele all of a sudden becomes somebody who's massively important to the slate or anything. The one that I do think would make the most sense here, it is if we have no Jamal Murray, that's something that I think could impact players. And Jokic would look better in the absence of Jamal Murray. Russell Westbrook would look better. Is there anybody else who would maybe improve from Denver? Because I am going to give these guys small ROI boost in the Sims just so I get to more of them, because I do think they're under-owned in the event that Jamal Murray's ruled out.
It's probably a hair better for Christian Brown. In theory, it should be better for Julian Strawther, although he doesn't appear to be getting the minutes in those situations that I kind of expected him to get. I didn't think they would lean on Russell Westbrook as much as they have, but they are doing that. He's so bad. He's so bad. I don't understand why he's still getting any sort of leash anywhere. I mean, he has been just straight next level ass offensively for like 4+ years now. And it's not changing now. Lowest true shooting of his career. Oh no, actually not the lowest. Shout out to that OKC season. 50.9% true shooting 32% from three. He's never been able to do that. 29% from mid-range. He's shooting 62% from the line. That's 7th percentile. They should be doing the exact opposite with him, and that's not playing him these minutes. And yet, for some reason, they are playing him these minutes. I don't understand it.
Other side of this, if Jamal Murray ends up playing, I don't think he's going to get very much ownership by the field. I know he's projected for, what do we got him in for? We got him for 20% ownership over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we've got Jamal Murray projected for about the same, 21% ownership. If Jamal Murray does end up playing, and this is something that Eric and I talk about all the time on Live Before Lock, Josh, when you get these slates, especially when somebody's in a later locking game and they're listed as questionable, they always come in lower owned than what their projection is.
Yeah,
I think there's a scenario where you could get Jamal Murray on, a 5-game slate, especially on DraftKings, probably at single-digit ownership. And that's really appealing to me. FanDuel, I think that he's also viable, but at 8K, I wouldn't see him as quite the same potential upside play if he's in. I find him very interesting at DraftKings at what I assume is going to be like 8-ish% ownership if he does end up going.
Yeah, that's tricky. I wonder if you get some of the opposite path for that, where people have him in today and it's Christmas and like he just stays in instead of getting fixed after 8 hours of basketball throughout the day and people just being hopped up on eggnog and gingerbread and shit. Like, does he end up with slightly higher ownership because of less people paying attention to?
I've just seen these scenarios too many times, and I think you two, Chad, would probably agree with this too. Here's what hand builders are doing. They're just not even considering Jamal Murray. And then what a lot of people using something like Optimizer, maybe even our Sims are doing, is they get Jamal Murray and just be like, you know what, zeroing him out, negative ROI boost, take him out of the Optimizer so you don't even have to deal with it. That's where I think he ends up coming in lower owned. But chat, let us know what you guys are going to be doing with Jamal Murray, because that's really what I think the majority of people do is they see questionable, they see the late game, and they just go, you know what, I'm not going to deal with it. And then people just cross their fingers and hope it doesn't burn them, either where they hope Jamal Murray plays and just has an average game and that it's not something that really impacts them. And then they also hope that he doesn't sit out to where other guys become better values. That's what I think people are going to end up doing.
I think you're probably right.
Well, we are 1 for 1 so far because Supercube 30 said 1,000%, Greg. So it seems to be that is what he is going to be doing. If you guys have any questions for us, you can leave a super chat or you could leave a question in our premium Discord channel. I'm going to be on the lookout for any questions that come in here, and I'll be answering them on the show. But considering that I don't think we're going to be getting any sort of real late breaking news that comes in, I think Josh and I could just kind of talk about this slate straight up and just go through some of the ownership projections and see what it is that is standing out to us. So let's start by looking at the chalk on the slate, Josh. And we could do kind of good chalk, bad chalk, and are these players that we think are overowned, underowned, or are they just guys who are about appropriately owned? They want to be about even with the field on. So I'll start by looking at DraftKings. And for the DraftKings ownership, here's the chalk. We've got, let's group these three guys together because they're kind of in a different tier of ownership. We've got Kevin Durant, 52.6% projected owned, Devin Vassell, 52.4% projected owned, and then Tyus Jones at 44.9%. So you got two guys in the mid-range, and then you got one guy in Kevin Durant who's a really popular spend-up option. So let's start with Durant, who's in his own price tag. Do you agree with him being the number one overall spend-up option on the slate?
I mean, clearly not having Devin Booker around is incredibly helpful. I think it's probably still Jokic for me. It's not that Durant isn't grading out well, because he absolutely is. He's in my top 10. But I have Jokic ahead of him in terms of spend ups. Now, obviously, that is a slightly different tier. We're talking about an extra $2,600 too. But I think I would want to get Jokic before I got Durant. I just feel like Durant has the same game every night. Like, this isn't much of a take or anything, but I just feel like any one of these Phoenix guys, like no matter who's in or who's out, I feel like they all do the exact same thing every single time. And it's like a good game, not a great game. But I have Durant 5th in my rankings. I have Jokic 3rd. So I'm going to say Jokic, but Durant would be 2nd for me. I think those two are pretty clearly the top two.
So for me, I have the most exposure to Durant of any of the spend ups. The caveat being is I'm still underweight to the field on him. He's in about 40% of my lineups when he's projected for north of 50% ownership. I always never know the right exact way to explain this because like I get more exposure to Durant than any of the other pay up options, but I'm underweight to him. So like it's not like it would having 40%. It's not like it's the end of the world for me if Durant has a ceiling game, but ideally I'd like somebody else to be the highest scorer on the slate. I am overweight to the field on Jokic, Josh. I have Jokic in just a few less lineups than Kevin Durant, but we've got Kevin Durant nearly double the ownership of Nikola Jokic right now. Yeah. So I'm on the same boat as you, whereas relative to ownership, if I'm only picking one guy, if I'm building a single entry lineup out right now and somebody says, who should I pay up for? I'm going to answer Jokic. And by the way, this is taking into account that the assumption that Jamal Murray plays in the projections right now. So if Jamal Murray was to sit and I'm already overweight to this is why I feel even better about this position. If Jamal Murray sits, I'm already overweight to the field on Jokic, and then I'm really happy with my Jokic exposure.
Yeah, that's a double whammy for you too, because even if Murray's in, it's not like you look at this like, shit, I got so much Nikola Jokic, man, my day is going to be troublesome. Like, you're happy to have any amount of Nikola Jokic you get every single day, pretty much no matter what. And you also have the opportunity for that to look even better down the line. So I love taking that stand. You've got plenty of opportunities to swap throughout the day. I mean, we have, the 2:30 swap, the 5 o'clock swap, the 8 o'clock swap, where you have plenty of time to redistribute these lineups. So I have a big preference in trying to get a little bit more in these later games, particularly on a day like today, just because of the gap in time for these games. Like, late swap is about as important as it can get on something like this, where you've got 2.5 hours every game.
And I am, without even making any kind of real significant adjustments, like I did give a little bit of boost to guys from Denver just because of that Jamal Murray situation. But even without that, the Sims just backload my lineups as is. And a lot of it's because Devin Booker is out for the Suns and the pricing just isn't adjusted for that. And as a result, you get somebody like Tyus Jones being super popular. The other two chalky guys who I just brought up before, it's Tyus Jones and Devin Vassell. I am finding it impossible to get away from Tyus Jones, Josh. And once again, what I do like about this is in the event that Jamal Murray sits, cool, I'm going to have a little bit more flexibility to move some of those lineups to get myself to Russell Westbrook. But I find Tyus Jones to be the best overall piece of chalk on the entire slate, and by far my most rostered player.
No disagreement coming from me when I ran my faux contenders to start the day. Tyus Jones, number 1 overall. look, he gets additional opportunity because Devin Booker is not around. The ball is in his hands more. He has the opportunity to pick up some additional assists. And for 5,200, like in theory, he has an opportunity for a couple extra minutes if it's that type of game. Not that he usually falls into like crazy minutes, but it's not like they're not available to him. He's cost effective. You know, you kind of wish that he had an MPE that would make it a little bit more flexible, but that doesn't seem to be stopping anybody. He's already 50% owned, and I think he deserves every bit of it. I mean, he still looks good on FanDuel. It's $6K. That's $800 more expensive than he is on DraftKings. I think he's probably the first name to click in every lineup. It works really well.
Yeah, and another really big aspect of this is there just aren't that many guys who are viable players for the Suns to give minutes to. I saw somebody brought this up in chat, but Grayson Allen's out today as well. It's not just Devin Booker. Devin Booker's obviously the big name that's out for the Phoenix Suns, but you start to look at the minutes and then also that these games are kind of high. They're not really higher leverage games, but they're games that the NBA and the players seem to care a little bit more about. So I don't have any actual research to this, but my expectation is that we can see key players play 1 to 2 more minutes, which does make a difference on a 5-game slate. And, you know, if you're giving somebody who is around a point per minute fantasy producer a couple more minutes, that makes a pretty big deal in terms of where they rate out relative to their price tags.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it would, but an extra fantasy point to anybody is a massive increase when you run through data. You give them an extra 2 fantasy points, and these guys are changing their ownerships in big, big ways. So it really doesn't take much to sort through this kind of stuff. And, you know, with no Booker, no Grayson Allen, like all the minutes in the world are there for Tyus Jones.
Do you have an issue with any of the ownership? And we'll look at FanDuel in a second as well, but any of these guys who are super, super popular on DraftKings, Devin Vassell as well. I'm right about in line with the field on Vassell. Yeah. He's in half my lineups. He's projected for 52.4% ownership. Do you have an issue with any of these guys who are really popular and look at them and say these guys should not be pulling the ownership they are?
Not really. Durant looks right. Vassell looks right. Tyus Jones looks right. I mean, Naz Reid's ownership always feels weird because of his role with the team, but to be 4,400, to be as good of a per minute guy as he is, to have this natural path to potentially more playing time if anything goes wrong for either Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert, like it all makes sense. But he's the type of guy that could just play 23 minutes because that's what happens today, and the other guys are going well, and you really need like an outlier game. Naz Reid is helpful because he could have an outlier performance and look good, or he could just get outlier positive minutes, and that makes up for not having to play as well. So I understand the ownership, and I agree with the ownership, but he's the only one that I look at that like kind of scares me a little bit.
Yeah, and the other part of this too about somebody like Naz Reid pulling the ownership he is, or somebody like Royce O'Neal being pretty popular is we have a lot of studs to spend up for on this slate. And because it is Christmas Day, where we're assuming that there aren't any key players who are going to be ruled out last minute, maybe Jamal Murray notwithstanding, is you have some of these guys in like the 4K range. I mean, even somebody like Nickeil Alexander-Walker's pulling 20% ownership at $3,600. It is less to do with these guys as much to do with guys like, hey, Jokic is only 11.6. Kevin Durant's only 9K. These are actually the best points per dollar plays on the slate is some of the spend up options. And the only way to get to them is you kind of have to play some flimsy guys in the high 3K to low 4K range to be able to actually play the best points per dollar plays on the slate. It's the inverse how it usually works. Usually it's like, oh my God, we've got these 3K guys that are projected for 25 fantasy points. So you want to play them because they're the best points per dollar plays. But then in turn, you're rostering like a 12K guy who's projected for 58 fantasy points or something like that. So a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, oh, I don't want to play Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But the alternative is if you want to play Nikola Jokic, Kevin Durant, if you want to play Anthony Davis, LeBron James, you have to play some of these guys. And that's kind of the reality of what it is. So yeah, I'm with you where I look at Naz Reid. It's like, really, should Naz Reid be in 40% of my lineups at $4,400? And then you realize that there isn't really an alternative.
No, you just like in terms of value, he's probably the best value option on the slate. It's just not the traditional value option that we're used to. But I mean, there's from a pay down perspective, there's not much out there. Like the 4Ks are loaded. Devin Vassell is still 4,900 for reasons that don't make a ton of sense to me. Jaden McDaniels, Trace Jackson Davis, Daniel Gafford, Dante DiVincenzo, Nikhil Alexander Walker. Like these are all 4K and 3K guys that are getting, 20+% ownership. None of those guys are like traditional value plays. We're not walking into a Ryan Rollins or a like replacement guy in a spot that matters a bunch. This is just like the best of the 4K guys that exist on this slate. It's a very different makeup than what we've had a lot lately, honestly.
One thing that FanDuel did, which makes the slate different from DraftKings, is DraftKings, I think this is because it's hard to know if they did this intentionally because it's Christmas or just the pricing algorithm is fucked up. Also something that's very, very viable. FanDuel just went and did very strict pricing where it's kind of hard to find a ton of value over on FanDuel. And as a result, the ownership is ridiculously spread out. There's only 3 players pulling more than 25% ownership on FanDuel because of how fair the pricing is. Kevin Durant is 44% owned. Bradley Beal is 36% owned. Trace Jackson Davis is 32% owned. That's it for players more than 25% owned. You got 25% ownership to Royce O'Neal. You got 25% ownership to Tyus Jones, 24% ownership to Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. So the ownership much more spread out on the FanDuel side of things. And I find it to be really difficult to build lineups I like on FanDuel because it's like I'm just playing a bunch of guys where the pricing is pretty much fair, which is why I personally prefer the DraftKings slate today. But I see the first question we have here related to the slate. It is from FanDuel, and it is Mike1377. He says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you as well, Mike. He says on
Happy
FanDuel,
holidays.
he's getting to all. Sorry, what was that?
Happy holidays. I don't want to be uninclusive to people today.
There we go. Because as we found out from YouTube chat, Josh, very, very woke. Very woke.
Quite woke.
Yeah, people were not happy with something Josh said the other day. But anyway, Mike says on FanDuel he's getting to a lot of Steph Curry. He wants to know what are our thoughts on Steph Curry, and this is going to be FanDuel related. Now, in general, I prefer Steph Curry on DraftKings just from a standpoint of obviously 3 points are massive to his value, and over on DraftKings that counts for more than it does on FanDuel. Looking at the FanDuel lineups I've built, I come in a little bit overweight to the field on Steph Curry. I guess it depends what you're calling a lot of him. Like, is he in 60 to 70% of your lineups? Is he in 30%? I do think at $8,500, I don't have an issue with Steph Curry at all at $8,500. I came in slightly overweight to the field to him, but I don't have like some massive Steph Curry FanDuel stand.
I think he looks great. He came in number 3 in my FanDuel contenders run before I started this, only behind Brunson and Beal. So he's grading out really well to me on the FanDuel side. Hasn't been great for Golden State just yet with this Schroeder trade, but you figure they'll snap out of that eventually.
Yeah, I think my preference with the pay-ups on FanDuel is to kind of spread out where I'm getting exposure to. I want some of Durant. I want some of Steph Curry. I want to be getting to LeBron on FanDuel as well. And I mean, the field kind of sees it the same way. The field is playing a lot of these guys in 20 to 25% of lineups. So I wouldn't want to have more than half my lineups with any one of these pay-ups. So
no.
That's kind of where I'm at, Mike. But yeah, if you're just building a couple of lineups, Steph Curry certainly fine to be one of the guys you're anchoring those lineups around. The player I get the most of over on FanDuel, Josh, it's actually Bradley Beal. He at $6,800 is one of the only players that I find to be grossly mispriced over on FanDuel. He's also MPE, small forward shooting guard, which is super beneficial positionality. So Bradley Beal is the one guy I point to on FanDuel as being a way stronger play there than he is on DraftKings. How do you view Bradley Beal as rating out at $6,800 on FanDuel?
He is the number 1 play on FanDuel for me right now. Number 1 in my optimal score, number 4 in my boom score, at number 1 overall because of those 2 numbers. I mean, you get great positional eligibility across the guard and forward spots. You get a price tag that's not reflective of the fact that Grayson Allen and Devin Booker aren't playing. It couldn't really get much easier to play Bradley Beal on FanDuel. He looks incredible. You should be getting, there's a reason he's 36% owned. He deserves every bit of it.
All right. Westbrook Forever wants to know, who am I ROI boosting today? You're going to like this based on your name, Westbrook Forever, but I did not massive ROI boosts, but slight ones to the Phoenix Denver game and just across the board, like 5% to all of the key players in that game, including Russell Westbrook. just so that my lineups are a little bit more backloaded in the event that Jamal Murray doesn't play. And then even if he does play, I want to be a little bit overweight to the field on Jamal Murray because, like I said at the top, I just don't think he's going to be a guy the field wants to click on. So I think it makes a lot of sense to give yourself, and even if just other players end up getting ruled out, which I don't think is the most likely outcome, but it could happen. We do have the Boston Celtics. Maybe Jason Tatum's actually significantly sick. We found out he was going to be out, 45 seconds before the Celtics game the other day. We found out that it was going to be that Jason Tatum wasn't going to play. So who knows? Maybe he actually is too sick to be playing and he gets ruled out. Derek White is questionable. And the easiest way to give yourself flexibility to make any of those swaps is just if you have more exposure to the later game. So I think doing little boost, not anything crazy. You don't want to go all right, 50% ROI boost to Nikola Jokic or anything like that. But if you just gave everybody who's meaningful in the last game a 5% ROI boost, it'll give you a couple percentage more ownership to all of those guys, and it'll give you more flexibility over the course of the day. One final point on that as well, even if nobody was to get ruled out, the biggest edge you have in NBA DFS, it's late swap. And whatever you could do to be prepared in the event those late swaps end up happening, and this isn't just for today, this is for all slates, that's what's going to give you the biggest edge over the course of an entire season. So that's the direction that I want to be going. Anything else you want to add to that, Josh?
No, you crushed it. Late swap is everything, particularly on a day like today. Get yourself set up that you can make those moves, because the best value that exists on a slate like today is the value that shows up that we didn't know we had at lock, and you are uniquely available to move that around and take advantage of it. Pre-lock, if there was no late swap, NBA DFS is about as hard as it gets. There's not a lot of edge to be found at that point in time. Squeeze it out where you can with late swap.
Even if there isn't any late swap situations that end up coming up, you're going to come out ahead more often than not if you do just make yourself prepared for whenever they might end up happening over the course of the season here. Let's see. No super chats, no other questions that have come in. So let's go back to looking at some of the ownerships here on FanDuel and DraftKings. And, once again, no real massive chalk on FanDuel. DraftKings, we got three fairly popular guys in Tyus Jones, Devin Vassell, and Kevin Durant. I want to ask you on the other side, because we talked about liking Nikola Jokic as a spend-up option, although he's also, 32% owned over on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you got Nikola Jokic. A little bit harder to get to because there's only one center spot and he's 12,300, but he's still 14% owned. If you had to pick a lower owned pay up option to be getting to, is there anybody that you get overweight to that isn't Nikola Jokic or Kevin Durant? Because those are the two most popular spend ups on the DraftKings slate. None of the other pay up options are currently projected for more than 16% ownership. LeBron is 16.6% owned. He is the next guy priced over 8K that pulls the most ownership over Jokic and Durant. So if anybody who isn't Jokic or Durant, anybody that stands out to you think the field might be missing out on by not playing much of?
I think it's one of the centers. I think it's either Karl Anthony Towns at 10,100, or I think it's Joel Embiid at 9,500. Neither one of these guys is pulling all that much ownership, but I don't think it'd be the craziest scenario in the world for Towns to have a really big game here against San Antonio in the opener. You are then locking in that spot, so you're costing yourself a little bit of future flexibility. Or you get Embiid in that third game, not the best matchup here against Boston. Who knows? Maybe Holiday and White and Tatum all sit and it becomes a much better spot. But, 90, it feels weird to get Joel Embiid at 9,500. I don't think that he is the Joel Embiid of old, but he could just be healthy for a bit and become that guy again. And if he's 6% owned on a 5-gamer, I think that's probably a guy you'd be willing to take a little bit of a run at.
I'm really having a hard time figuring out with Joel Embiid, especially because, this morning I open up Odd Shopper, and there's only 5 games. So there's some bets that are popping up, but it's not as much as there is on, like a 11 or 12 game NBA slate or anything like that. And the number one bet on the board, it was Joel Embiid under 9.5 rebounds. And it gave me a little bit of pause at first. Like, wait, 9.5 rebounds, that feels like a low prop for Joel Embiid. But then I go and I look at some of his rebound numbers. It's like, what has happened to Joel Embiid's rebounds this year? I wonder if part of him trying to be a little bit more conservative with his health is leading to him be just the easiest way for him to maybe preserve himself is diving on the floor a little bit less and maybe not banging for rebounds quite as often. Joel Embiid is averaging 6.8 rebounds per game this year. Do you think that this is something that just small sample. He's only played in a handful of games. So
Yeah.
do you think this is a small sample size thing, or should we expect there to be a lower rebound rate for Joel Embiid this year and going forward?
I think we have to assume that it's going to be a little bit less than what we used to see from him. Like, no matter what we think that he can get back to or become or whatever he's going to be moving forward, he's certainly not the same physical guy, no matter what. No matter how healthy he gets to today, he's not going to get to rebounds as quickly as he could have before by default. No matter what, he can be like, yo, I felt better today than I have in years. That's still not the guy from 5 years ago that could rebound 30+% of opponents' misses. So I do think that it is going to naturally be a little bit lower. It also strikes me as something that will, assuming we know that he like can make it through the year, like he's periodically in and out. I think just getting out there and playing more and getting back into like the consistency of it all will just naturally bring that up. I mean, when push comes to shove, he's still a 7-foot tall monster of a human being when he's out there. It can only fall so low. And the more like in the flow of it, the better his conditioning gets. I think he scoops up some of them by default, but I think like the crazy rebounding days are gone. It's weird that we're having this conversation, and I don't mean it negatively. Like, he's still rebounding 21% of defensive rebounds, which is still 84th percentile. And we're like, man, what a fall from grace.
Yeah. The one that really stood out to me that made me think about it is because I watched almost the entirety of the Charlotte and 76ers game from last week. That was a game where there was a bunch of value on the Hornets. So I was like, well, I'm stuck watching this shitty basketball game because these are the players I'm rooting for today. And Joel Embiid did not have a single rebound in that game until the fourth quarter, which was insane to me. And it was all the announcers were talking about too. Is like, is Joel Embiid going to go an entire game as a 7-footer without getting a rebound? And then he had, I think it was one possession, he did the tip drill where he ended up getting a tip in, but he got 3 offensive rebounds and that was how he finally got on the stat sheet. Then he pulled down a couple of other rebounds. But yeah, he had that game against a pretty weak front court where he finished with only 5 rebounds. And then the other games around that, a little bit more fluky circumstances, breaks his face when he gets hit in the face, only plays 17 minutes against the Pacers, finishes with 4 rebounds, and then gets ejected last game out against the Spurs and only has 3 rebounds in that game. So some of the numbers are a little bit fluky for that reason, but I do have some concerns about the rebound rate for Joel Embiid. My answer to the question I had posed to you, which started all this off. Now, I went to this guy as a contrarian option the other day, and it didn't really end up working out, but I didn't feel bad about it because he was pacing to have a good game. But Luka Doncic, he's just over 10% owned on this slate. And at $11,100, that is not an expensive price tag for Luka either. That is just about as cheap as he's been the entire season. I think he had one slate where he was, or 2 slates where he was at 11,000 flat. Last game, I think a lot of people would be like, rostered Luka at low ownership last game. It didn't end up working out. He scored 47 fantasy points and didn't play the end of the game because it was a blowout. So he still ended up putting up, 27 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He lost out on 8 to 10 minutes in the fourth quarter, though, because of the way that the game script was playing out. In a game today that should be more competitive, Dallas only favored by 5 points against the Minnesota Timberwolves, being a Christmas Day game. There's an opportunity for Luka to play 40 minutes, maybe put up a triple-double at low ownership. I like getting overweight to Luka, Josh. I have him a little bit over 20% of my lineup, so I'm more than double the field when he's just about 10% owned. What do you make of Luka as a really expensive alternative to Jokic?
I think he looks really good, actually. The only reason that I didn't mention him is just because I have his optimal rate basically spot on the ownership, where I had Towns and Embiid a bit under owned. But I mean, I've got him at 12%. It's not too far off the pace of like Jokic, who's getting a lot more ownership. I think he's pretty clearly better than Wemby today, even at that higher salary. I like the Luka shout. Certainly not a guy that I'm ever mad about having a little bit more of. Feels like the type of game that he might get up for, although he also strikes me as the milk and cookie type from the night before. So might not be feeling great. I know I have way too much milk in my tummy from the past day and a half of eating way too many cookies these past 2 days, but for paying up for him, yeah, like if you want to dodge a 30% owned Jokic by getting to a 12% owned Luka, I like that pivot. I definitely don't want Wemby as much. I don't I think he looks a lot better than Towns, even though I mentioned Towns. I just think Towns' ownership was a little low. Same for Embiid, but I think he looks better than Jason Tatum. I think he looks as good as LeBron. LeBron's just getting bailed out a little bit by a much better price tag. But yeah, I think Luka looks really good here. Anxious to see how he looks here against a full strength Minnesota team too.
We've got a super chat here from Bang Bro Nelly. Bang Bro Nelly wants to know, is Ryan Dunn a good FanDuel play today at $3,900? So once again, Suns a little bit shorthanded. FanDuel pricing is really tight today. Ryan Dunn, $3,900. We saw him start earlier in the season, Josh. Is he somebody of interest to you when he's at a cheap price point? There's an opportunity for additional playing time, and then there's also just not that much value available on FanDuel.
I mean, interest is a weird way to describe it. Like, yeah, he is very rosterable today. 3,600 power forward only. He's getting around 10% owned. I got him at 12% optimal coming out of the Sims. Like, you're looking for 25 fantasy points plus out of him on a day like today. Maybe something like 26, 27 range. Certainly there's minutes to go around for Phoenix. He's just not any good. You know, he's a 0.8 guy at best. You need the shots to fall for sure. But it's not like we talked about it at the jump. All of the value exists in like this 4K range of guys that play pretty regularly. The 3K range is pretty bleak. He's as good of an option as any. And I also don't hate the idea of locking myself into a value piece like Ryan Dunn in the last game, because if something moves around, you have plenty of opportunities to do it earlier. If this Denver Phoenix game was the noon start, I'd probably have a lot less interest in locking in a spot just on Ryan Dunn.
Yeah, I think he's reasonable. Here's how little of a strong take I have here, though. This will very rarely happen, but went and ran everything through the Sims for DraftKings and FanDuel, and I pull up Ryan Dunn in the FanDuel Sims. My leverage on him, which is, for the leverage column in our Sims, it's what's their projected ownership, what's the amount of exposure you have. Leverage, 0.0%. I was exactly in line with the field on Ryan Dunn. I think he's perfectly reasonable at $3,900, if nothing else than just for the reasons that Josh had brought up too, where if there's anybody who's a value option who you maybe have a decent inclination on, you feel like, I think this is a guy who could get some extra minutes and step up today. Yeah, make it somebody who's going to be in the last game of the slate, where in the scenario where somebody is ruled out unexpectedly, you get a little bit more flexibility, maybe swap even to a stronger value option. And then as is, Ryan Dunn looks reasonable as well. So Bang Bro Nelly. Yeah, go ahead and play Ryan Dunn today on FanDuel. I think that's a pretty decent looking option. So next thing I want to ask you, Josh, is going to be contrarian value options. We'll see if there's anybody we could mine out for cheap that the field isn't getting to. Then we'll talk about our best plays at each position, and then we're almost done with our hour here already. So if you guys haven't done yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're looking to sign up for any of the packages we have here at Stokastic, links are down below in the YouTube description box, and any package you sign up for does come with access to our Discord channel. Are there any contrarian value options that you think that the field should be getting to that they aren't at the moment?
Nobody immediately looks awesome in relative to their ownership. I don't know, Caleb Martin, Max Christie. I think the guys that are getting the love are the guys that should be, whether that's, Precious, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Ryan Dunn, McBride. But I think Caleb Martin might be a little light. I think Max Christie's probably a little light, even though he sucks on a per minute basis. I don't really have anybody else that looks super under-owned today.
Yeah,
do you have anybody that's standing out to you?
I'm doing one more Sims run. There was an ownership update that came in towards the top of the show, and I had run my lineups before we started. So I'm doing one more run here to see if there's anything really that stands out. It's funny though, you mentioned Max Christie, and a reason that I actually do like Max Christie, beyond the fact that I think he already looks reasonable as is, I think D'Lo is very live to end up sitting today. He's somebody who I do think that his injury is something that actually has him as being questionable, unlike the Anthony Davis, LeBron James duo, where I think their injuries are completely fugazi. And D'Lo, as is, we talked about it earlier in the show, where he's kind of fallen out of favor with the Lakers. He's been terrible this year. He is good enough to where he's better than the other bench players, to where just on talent, he belongs to be in the rotation. But based on decision-making and the effort he's given this year, you could see why he's fallen out of favor with JJ Redick. And if you do get a situation where he doesn't end up playing, he just sits because he's actually hurt, or you just get the typical D'Lo effort where he's kind of loafing around, he's taking shitty shots where he gets the ball just like, hey, I'll just heave this from 33 feet away because why not? Then you see that JJ Redick will have a trigger to go and send D'Lo to the bench and won't bring him back for the rest of the game. So there's scenarios where there's upside for Max Christie. The most reasonable one is going to be the event that just D'Lo doesn't end up playing. But this doesn't really fall into the category of value option, Josh. But somebody who I do think for some of those same reasons is going overlooked by the field, Austin Reaves at $6,100 on DraftKings. I really, really like Austin Reaves. He's somebody I'm getting myself a good amount of exposure to.
Yeah, he's 27% owned. That is not a value option nor an unearthed option in this scenario. But yeah, I mean, I like Austin Reaves as well. I didn't expect you to just give me a chalk player in this spot.
Yeah, it stood out to me because I was doing my final run of the Sims and just showed up. I was like, boy, I've got a ton of exposure to Austin Reaves now. So I just wanted to make sure I shouted that out. As far as a actual low-owned player, though, let me sort by leverage and see somebody who's pulling lower ownership. Well, Joel Embiid. There's still upside on Joel Embiid. He's only 9% owned now, but obviously that wouldn't work for this particular answer.
Christian Brown at 5K might be a little light, especially with potentially no Murray. Nurkic, I think, is probably a little light.
Oh, here's somebody who I ended up getting overweight to the field to now as I'm scrolling through the final version of my lineups. Aaron Gordon at $5,600, as is. His price tag is kind of reasonable. Then you get the possibility that Jamal Murray doesn't play. That would make Gordon look better at $5,600. Then also, once again, just somebody's in the later locking game. So $5,600 Aaron Gordon, just 10% ownership. He's someone I'm getting overweight to, Josh, and that's without even changing anything.
Josh Hart feels a little underowned at 6,900. He's at like 5.5%. You know he's going to be out there for a ton. Even look, like Jaylen Brown's 7,800. That's a pretty good Jaylen Brown price for 5% ownership today. If you want to, like sort of pay up to be contrarian a bit. There's not a lot. Ownership looks pretty good today.
I agree. Let's see if there was any final. Okay, 2 super chats here, and then we'll just go over guys we got the most exposure to at each position here. But Cloud LLC wants to know better play, Vassell at shooting guard or small forward on draft. It's the same. It's not something I think about.
I wouldn't think about it.
Yeah, let me look. I mean, the only way I could answer this is I look at which other. I mean, I look at some of the other guys too. It's like, all right, I get a good amount of Royce O'Neal and OG Anunoby at the small forward position at shooting guard. I have a good amount of Austin Reaves. I've got some of Dante DiVincenzo. Yeah, it's about the same. The only thing I would say about Vassell is that he's a much better play at shooting guard or small forward in the first Locky game than he is at, say, the utility or the guard or the forward spots. That's the only other thing I have to add. Other than that, it doesn't meaningfully change your lineup. So he's at shooting guard or small forward.
I would never know where I had him.
Yeah, I don't either. The only times that it really stands out to me is some like the 2 or 3 game slates, and I'll just be really light at exposure to one position, and then it's like, okay, this is just not a position I get very much exposure to in the flex or the guard / forward spots. But for Vassell, yeah, no real difference that I notice. Andre Rules 07 wants to know thoughts on Gafford for single entry. I don't think Gafford is somebody I'd be playing in a single entry lineup. He's just not that high of a priority for me, but I don't have.
He's the highest owned Mav right now.
He's probably, let's see, if I sort by Mavericks players.
He's the only Mav getting anything that isn't Luka. He's got 20. He's at 22%. Luka's at 10, and everybody else is at 3 or below. So I understand why that kind of question is coming in. It doesn't feel great. I mean, his path to more minutes is certainly like attached to Lively, but I don't think it's a bad play because he's a good per minute guy, and there is a path to additional minutes. It doesn't exactly get me excited, but I don't I don't have a problem using him in a single entry lineup.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on Daniel Gafford for today. I just don't have a big stand one way or the other. If I was building a lineup, I wouldn't say I need to have Daniel Gafford in that single entry lineup. I just don't have a strong take here. He's reasonable. He's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like
I think
people
he's
hate that answer
overowned
when I don't have like a strong take on somebody, but there's a lot of guys on the slate who are about 20% owned who probably should be about 20% owned.
The problem is it's like everybody would like us to have a strong take on these guys, and this entire setup is designed to like not have a strong take on players.
Yeah, I like the player that I have the biggest stand on is already somebody who's popular, but I've got Tyus Jones in 3/4 of my lineup. So he's the guy I'm most overweight to the field to. He also happens to be one of the most popular players on the slate, and I think he should be even more popular than what he is just based on his potential playing time today. So my biggest stand is on somebody who's already really popular that I'm making even more popular in my lineups. Pat Clay Tomstar wants to know, which game are we looking forward to the most?
I mean, it's got to be Minnesota Dallas, right? I don't think any of the others are even worth the conversation.
For nostalgia purposes, Lakers Warriors, it feels like every time Steph and LeBron play against each other, it could be the last time they play against each other. So
fair.
There's that element of it for myself. I always love watching Jokic play. So Jokic against the Suns. For me, though, my actual answer, it's the first game on the slate, just because of every player in the league right now, my favorite to watch play is Wemby. You just have somebody who's very unique who, we've never seen a player like Wemby before. We're never going to see a player like him again. Whenever there's generational type talents, they do things in ways that nobody else is able to replicate. For Wemby, it's because of his physical advantages. Wemby is getting to a point now where he feels like he's a triple-double with blocks as a potential for every single time that he goes out and plays. I mean, Wemby, 6 blocks in the first quarter the other day? So it's not really a game I'm looking forward to as much as I just like watching Wemby play. I think he's fun and unique.
Yeah, no problem with that. In terms of game, to me, it's just clearly Minnesota Dallas. It's not Philly Boston. The Lakers and Warriors are a shell of themselves. If Phoenix were at full strength, I'd be really interested in that. But with no Booker, it takes a step back. Whereas Minnesota and Dallas, they're both at full strength. And this could very well be like a Western Conference Finals preview. It wouldn't surprise me at all for something like that to happen. So everything else is just sort of meh. Like Phoenix sucks or Philly sucks. San Antonio is not any good. But Wemby is, God, he's so damn good, man. He's so damn good. Year 2, what is this become? If he's healthy for the next 3 years, like what the hell is he doing in 2028? Breaking basketball, probably.
We'll save it, whatever. We only got a few minutes left. But I was going to ask if you've looked at his Darko and his EPM ratings, because he is now gotten to a point where it's like top 5 player in the league according to all of the projection metrics.
He's number 2 overall in Darko.
Yeah,
behind
and
Jokic.
I think he's 3 in EPM now.
And like, I don't disagree with that. Like, the offense is just going to get better and better and better. And the defense is just going to be awesome for years, barring injury. Like, he's already probably the best defensive player in basketball. Like, you can make a case for some others. That case isn't going to last very long. Every day is going to get better and better for offense. The more talent he gets around him in San Antonio is going to make his offense even more incredible, as crazy as that sounds. He's so damn good. He's the best basketball player we've seen since LeBron James came into the league, and it's not close.
I agree. Let's wrap up with this. Just a few minutes left to go. One more time, if you guys haven't done it, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If any last-second questions come in, I'm certainly going to be answering them. But let's go for both DraftKings and FanDuel here. Josh, starting with DraftKings, just our favorite player to be rostering at each position. You can answer this however you want. If it's just player who showed up the most frequently for you, that's how I'm going to be answering it. Or if it's just somebody who's like, hey, this guy's 10% owned, having 30% a lineup. So therefore it makes them stand out to me more at this position. But starting a point guard for me on DraftKings, it's Tyus Jones.
Completely agree. Third most exposed guy, number 1 ranked dude. It's got to be. It's got to be.
Shooting guard for me, that is going to be Well, so the answer would be Devin Vassell, but I want to say I'm at small forward here, which is funny because we got that question before. But the reason is because I want to shout out Austin Reaves, who I ended up getting myself well overweight to the field too. So I'll go with Austin Reaves at shooting guard so that I could say Devin Vassell at small forward. But Austin Reaves showed up in way more lineups than I was anticipating.
Okay. I mean, my answer is Devin Vassell, obviously. But I kind of want to do the same thing that you're doing, just to use him at small forward. But I won't do that. I'm going to take Devin Vassell at the shooting guard spot.
All right. So then small forward for me, it is Devin Vassell.
Jaden McDaniels.
Okay. Power forward for me, that ended up being Naz Reid.
KD.
Yeah, and Naz Reid is just because of the price point thing. Kevin Durant as well, super strong option. Both Durant and Naz Reid in about 40% of lineups for me. And then at center, I just realized that Kevin Durant is center eligibility as well. So Naz Reid, power forward, Kevin Durant, center. These two could be interchangeable, whichever position I want to use them. But yeah, I also another thing too, where somebody had asked about which position we prefer to roster guys at. We've talked about this entire slate, and I only just now realized that Kevin Durant is center eligibility for no reason at all.
Yeah, I just don't see it anymore because of Sims and stuff. They're whatever roster spot they should be in. I mean, for the most part, whatever roster spot you're putting a guy in has more to do with the time of their game than the than where you want them to be. Like, no matter what roster spot you think you should be putting someone from Denver or Phoenix, it's probably guard, forward, or utility.
Yeah, that's true as well. But yeah, I don't even know what the reason would be that Kevin Durant is center eligible.
He plays center from time to time.
Is he playing more center than he's played in like small forward though? He doesn't have small forward eligibility.
He's playing more center than small forward.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Same exercise for the FanDuel side of things. So
I have it here for you. On cleaning the glass, 1% small forward, 90% power forward, 9% center.
There we have it. 9% center. That was enough to get him the NPE there. FanDuel side of things for me at point guard, same deal. Tyus Jones.
Oh shit.
If you don't have it, it's fine.
I don't have it. Well, actually, I have my contender stuff. So let me just sort that by my rankings, and I could just hit them. I don't have Sims or anything run. Point guard, Tyus Jones. Point guard, Jalen Brunson.
Shooting guard for me, Bradley Beal. Small forward for me. Kevin Durant. He's small forward on FanDuel.
Noted small forward. Kevin Durant is also my answer.
Power forward for me over on FanDuel. That is Trace Jackson Davis.
That would be Royce O'Neal.
And then center for me on FanDuel. The guy we were talking about before, Daniel Gafford's only $4,700 on a slate on FanDuel. There isn't that much value to be had. There's pretty clear upside in a $4,700 Daniel Gafford. So I do like him a good amount on FanDuel.
Yusuf Nurkic.
All right. And there we have it. I'm just going to double check to make sure there were no more late questions that came in, and there aren't. So we have reached lock here, guys. Merry Christmas. Hope you guys all have a great day. Enjoy your time, friends, family, or just simply watching basketball games on TV. NFL Live Before Lock is next. So if you guys are also playing the NFL slate, Matt Kajeski, Eric Lindquist, they are going to be on the channel for the next hour breaking down that for you guys. 2-game NFL slate as well. So thank you very much. Enjoy the day. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Peace out.